The conversation around Alex Anzalone has quietly turned into one of the most delicate roster questions facing the Detroit Lions right now. And it's not being driven by hot takes or speculation, it's coming straight from what we've seen on the field, inside the locker room, and in how this front office is operated. Anzalone has been part of this organization since the very beginning of the Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn era. He arrived when the team was rebuilding from the ground up, understood the system immediately, wore the green dot, set the defense, and played through some very lean years without ever becoming a problem. That context matters, because what's happening now is not about effort, leadership, or loyalty. It's about timing, age, money, and where the Lions believe this defense is headed next. Statistically, Anzalone's most recent season was solid, but not exceptional. He started 16 games, missed one due to injury, and finished with 95 tackles, 9 passes defended, 1 interception, 4 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. Those are respectable numbers for an off-ball linebacker, especially one asked to do as much as he was in coverage. Pro Football Focus graded him at 67.5, which placed him 33rd among qualifying linebackers. That's not elite, but it's not a liability either. The issue is that context again matters. Jack Campbell, playing alongside him, graded at an elite level, finishing second among all linebackers with a 90.0 grade. The defense clearly transitioned this season, with the green dot officially moving from Anzalone to Campbell, and Dan Campbell openly stating that this was now Jack's defense. Anzalone accepted that without public complaint, without a holdout, and without creating noise. Even though he was disappointed, his contract was not restructured or extended. Financially, Anzalone was playing on a deal that paid him roughly $6.25 million per year. And the final year of that contract just ended. He is now an unrestricted free agent heading into his age 32 season. Late in training camp, the team added some bonus money to ease frustrations, but there was no long-term commitment. That tells you something about how the Lions were already thinking. This front office has to make decisions with a long lens. Jack Campbell is going to need to be paid. Sam Laporta is going to need a second contract. Brian Branch is going to need a second contract. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to need a second contract. Those names are not hypothetical. They are priorities, and none of them are 30-year-old linebackers. The Lions already committed real money to Derek Barnes last offseason, giving him a 3-year, $23 million deal, and Barnes started all 17 games alongside Campbell and Anzalone, finishing with a 5 PFF grade. When you step back and look at the room, you see a younger core being positioned as the future. Anzalone, as reliable as he has been, sits outside that long-term timeline. Around the league, there is also real interest potential. Teams familiar with him, and with Aaron Glenn's defensive preferences, could see immediate value. His ability to play sideline to sideline, cover tight ends in man coverage, and communicate pre-snap responsibilities is not common. There was a specific example highlighted where Anzalone was essentially used as a nickel defender, playing man-to-man against Dallas tight end Jake Ferguson for an entire game. Something most teams do not ask inside linebackers to do. That versatility raises his value elsewhere. Even if Detroit is hesitant to commit multiple years, from the Lions' perspective, this becomes a philosophical decision. Do you bring Anzalone back on a team-friendly, short-term deal as a stabilizing veteran presence, knowing his role may continue to shrink? Or do you let him test the market, potentially replacing him with another veteran on a 1-year deal, someone who fits the budget and preserves flexibility? The file even raises the idea of a veteran linebacker on a cheaper short-term contract as a possible alternative. Consistent with Brad Holmes' recent approach to free agency, this is not a reflection of Anzalone failing, it's the reality of a team transitioning from rebuilt to sustained contention. What makes this situation compelling for fans is that Anzalone represents the bridge between eras. He was there when the team was struggling, helped establish the culture, and never complained when responsibilities shifted. At the same time, the Lions are now operating like a franchise that expects to compete every year, and that changes how resources are allocated. Letting a respected veteran walk is often the hardest step in that evolution. It's also one of the clearest signs that a team believes its younger core is ready to carry the load. So now the question sits right in front of the fan base. If you're looking at this strictly through the lens of production, age, cap management, and future extensions, does it make more sense for the Lions to try to bring Alex Anzalone back on a short, team-friendly deal, or is this the right moment to let him move on and fully turn the page to the next phase of the defense? What do you think the Lions should do here, and why? The deeper you go into this situation, the more it starts to feel like a crossroads moment rather than a simple contract negotiation. Because when you strip away the numbers, the grades, and the cap math, what you're really talking about is how the Lions see themselves right now. This team is no longer collecting veterans to stabilize a rebuild. It's choosing which veterans still fit a roster that expects to be in the postseason every year. That's a very different conversation, and Alex Anzalone just happens to be standing right in the middle of it. One thing that cannot be overstated is how professional Anzalone has been through all of this. When the green dot was taken off his helmet and handed to Jack Campbell, there was no drama. Dan Campbell publicly said this was now Jack's defense, and Anzalone didn't push back. He didn't check out. He didn't become a problem in the locker room. He continued to start, continued to play heavy snaps, and continued to do the dirty work that doesn't always show up in box scores. That matters in a building like this one, where culture is not a buzzword, it's a requirement. Coaches notice that. Teammates notice that. Front offices absolutely notice that. At the same time, the Lions are being forced to make choices that successful teams always have to make. You cannot pay everyone. You cannot keep every respected veteran, and you definitely cannot allocate significant money to positions where you already have younger, ascending talent that will soon demand extensions of their own. Jack Campbell isn't just part of the defense, he's being positioned as one of the faces of it. Brian Branch has already become indispensable. Sam Laporta is one of the most productive tight ends in football. Jahmyr Gibbs is a core offensive weapon. Those contracts are coming, whether fans like it or not, and every dollar matters. That's why the Anzalone situation feels less emotional inside the building than it does outside of it. From the outside, fans see leadership, toughness, and a player who's been there through the worst years. From the inside, the front office sees age, mileage, and a role that may not justify a multi-year commitment. Anzalone is entering his 832 season as an unrestricted free agent, coming off a year where his production was solid, but clearly not elite compared to his younger running mate next to him. In today's NFL, that combination usually leads to one of two outcomes: a short, team-friendly deal, or a departure to a team that needs experience immediately and is willing to pay for it. There's also the very real possibility that Anzalone's market value is simply higher elsewhere. Teams that know Aaron Glenn's system, or teams desperate for linebacker stability, could view him as a plug-and-play starter. He has shown he can handle coverage responsibilities that many linebackers cannot, including matching up with tight ends in man coverage, something that was specifically highlighted in how Detroit used him. That skill alone can earn a veteran a respectable contract on the open market, even if Detroit isn't comfortable matching it. If that happens, it doesn't mean the Lions failed him, and it doesn't mean he failed the Lions. It means both sides reached a natural point where their timelines no longer perfectly aligned. Detroit would move forward with a younger core, possibly supplemented by a cheaper veteran on a short-term deal. Anzalone would move on with a chance to play a prominent role elsewhere, maybe even chasing one more meaningful contract before the end of his career. For fans, this is the uncomfortable part of becoming a contender. The players you grow attached to don't always stay. The locker room leaders from the rebuild don't always get to be part of the championship version of the team. But that doesn't erase what they contributed, and it doesn't make the decision wrong. It just makes it hard. Now it's on you. Do you believe the Lions should prioritize continuity and bring Alex Anzalone back on a short, team-friendly deal, even if his role continues to shrink? Or is this the right time to fully commit to the younger core and let him finish his career somewhere else? If you zoom out even further, this decision also reflects how confident the Lions are in their internal development. Letting a player like Alex Anzalone walk is only possible if the coaching staff truly believes the next layer is ready. Jack Campbell isn't just a promising linebacker anymore, he's already being treated as the centerpiece of the defense. The moment the green dot changed hands, that was a signal not just for this season, but for the future. Everything about how Campbell was talked about, deployed, and trusted points to the Lions believing he can run the defense at a high level for years to come. That confidence naturally reduces the margin for a veteran like Anzalone. Even if he returns, his role would almost certainly continue to evolve. Fewer snaps, more situational usage, more emphasis on leadership and flexibility rather than being a full-time focal point. Some veterans embrace that transition. Others would rather go somewhere they can still be the guy, or at least one of them. At 32, with his skill set and experience, Anzalone may feel this is his last chance to secure a meaningful, multi-year deal and a defined role. That's not selfish. That's reality. There's also a subtle but important cap philosophy at play here. The Lions have consistently shown they prefer short-term, flexible veteran deals rather than longer commitments to players on the back half of their careers. That approach has allowed them to build depth without clogging future cap space. If Anzalone is seeking multiple years, even at a moderate annual number, that alone could be enough to push Detroit out of the conversation. It wouldn't be about whether they like him, it would be about whether the deal fits the broader plan. Another layer fans shouldn't ignore is how this affects the rest of the linebacker room. Keeping Anzalone could slow down opportunities for younger players to grow into larger roles. Letting him go forces the staff to either elevate someone internally or bring in a veteran specifically chosen to complement Campbell, not coexist with him. That's a cleaner long-term structure, even if it feels uncomfortable in the short term. And yet, there's still a scenario where a reunion makes sense. If Anzalone finds that the market isn't as aggressive as expected, and Detroit can bring him back on a one-year team-friendly deal, the value becomes obvious. You get experience, system knowledge, leadership, and depth, all without compromising future flexibility. In that case, everyone wins. The question is whether both sides are willing to meet in the middle, or whether the market pulls him away before that opportunity even exists. This is why this storyline matters more than it might seem on the surface. It's not just about one linebacker. It's about how the Lions balance loyalty with progression, culture with cap management, and short-term stability with long-term ambition. Teams that get this balance right stay competitive. Teams that get it wrong end up stuck in the middle. There's also a psychological layer to this that doesn't always get talked about, but absolutely exists inside NFL buildings. When a team decides to move on from a long-tenured veteran, it sends a message to everyone else in the locker room. Not a negative one, but a clear one. The message is that nothing is guaranteed except performance, fit, and timing. That standard is part of why the Lions' culture has hardened the way it has over the last few seasons. Players know where they stand. Roles are defined. And when those roles change, the organization expects professionalism, the same professionalism Alex Anzalone has shown from day one. That's why, regardless of how this plays out, Anzalone standing inside the building isn't in question. He didn't lose the green dot because he failed. He lost it because the team identified a younger player they believe can run the defense at an even higher level long term. That distinction matters. And it's why there's still respect on both sides, even as the business reality pushes them toward a possible separation. From a purely football standpoint, the Lions are betting on speed, range, and growth. The modern NFL keeps moving faster, and defenses are being stressed horizontally more than ever. Linebackers are asked to cover space, disguise responsibilities, and survive in mismatches against tight ends and running backs in the passing game. Anzalone has handled those responsibilities well, but the physical margin for error shrinks with age. Detroit knows that. Every front office does. They don't wait until the decline is obvious. They try to stay one step ahead of it. At the same time, letting a player like Anzalone walk also removes a safety net. There is value in having someone on the field who has seen everything, who understands the scheme instinctively, and who can settle a defense when things get chaotic. Young players don't always replace that immediately. Sometimes they never fully replace it. That's the risk side of the equation, and it's why this decision isn't as simple as younger is better. It's about whether the Lions believe their structure, coaching, and emerging leaders are strong enough to absorb that loss. And this is where fans are split because both arguments make sense. One side says, you don't mess with chemistry when you're trying to win now. The other says, you don't pay for yesterday's leadership when tomorrow's stars are already in the building. The Lions are trying to thread that needle, and Anzalone is the test case. No matter what happens, this moment represents a turning point. Either the Lions